Welcome to the first ever career agent podcast called Career Success. And I have the wonderful Millie Talbot here, who's very brave to come on first. You know, there's very much a measure of the woman. So I'm Rory Laughton-Scott, founder of The Career Agent, and we do career coaching for individuals to help them understand, build and land the career that makes them really happy. And we're also recruiters, and we help employers to achieve their vision and targets through effective recruitment and building high-performing cultures with the right people. The agenda for this podcast is threefold. Number one, it's going to try and help you to think about how you play to your strengths and passions in your career, and how you notice as you go through your childhood, school, and then your work, about how to play to your strengths and what you actually like. The second thing is what careers are available, what industries are growing, and we'll come on to that about Millie's company. And then the last thing is how to job search, how to sell yourself. And what I want to show is that everyone has the same worries, everyone has the same concerns, but actually we can learn from each other. So I'm speaking to Millie Talbot today, who works for Link.B. I got that right, didn't I?
You did, yeah.
As a senior publishing partnerships and growth manager. And the reason we're talking is for many reasons. Number one, she's a former client of ours. Two, you broke into the highly competitive fashion industry at a young age. Three, you didn't go to university, which is interesting. Four, you've changed industry since and left fashion into a growing digital industry. And then you've also worked really hard throughout and, done well. So my first question for you is, do you mind taking us through the journey from the weird and wonderful jobs to the serious jobs and how it all started, really?
Yeah, of course. Firstly, thanks for having me. An honor to be your first guest. So yeah, to kick things off, I guess from quite a young age, my parents always encouraged us to make our own money. We weren't given tons of pocket money to go and have a great time. So I really just wanted to shop and have fun with my friends. And therefore, I was motivated to earn some money in order to finance that lifestyle from probably, 14, maybe younger. Originally, obviously, there's not that many companies that want to employ a 14-year-old girl who lives in a village. My options were quite restricted. So I made little notes and put a note in a village send out that we have, the Village Voice. And I pretty much just put an advertisement out for any odd jobs. I was willing to do anything from dog walking to cleaning to babysitting to typing, literally anything and everything. So I quickly got a few jobs under my belt in my portfolio, generally within my summer holidays. So I used to do dog walking and typing for a man in our village who was a very successful racing commentator. I can see your mind glaring. I used to walk many dogs in the village, babysit for children. I don't know why people trusted a 14-year-old to babysit, but they trusted me. And yeah, I was pretty much up for anything where I could earn money. I would do it. So I'd be up and out in the mornings, walking people's dogs at the time that they'd set me, and earning easy £5, £10. Sometimes my mum would even meet me in the field and come on the walk too, and I was earning £5 or £10, and we'd just go for the walk together, and she'd bring our dogs. So it was pretty nice. It was a nice way to earn money, but I quickly kind of got the bug for it. Having money in your bank account that was self-earned was always, I guess, a motivation for me. And also you can reap the reward pretty quickly, whether it's in wasting it away buying shoes, which is pretty much what I did. I don't really pretend that I was really savvy and I started investing from a young age, but I was spending it how I wanted to spend it.
And did it ever come up in interviews that, you got out and grafted for money from a young, like, did it ever Was it ever used? Did it ever come up as a useful thing that you used as an example, or did it give an insight at all into what you're doing now or anything like that?
I think it might have come up once or twice. It definitely came up in my first retail job. The girl who interviewed me was amazing, Laurie. She was more interested in the hustle than the credentials.
Right. Yep.
So it felt worth bringing up. But also there comes a point at the very beginning of your career where you really have nothing to talk about. So you do have to talk about the jobs that you're not necessarily hugely proud of, or not. I'm not proud of them, but at the time it wasn't anything to really shout about. I've walked people's dogs in the village.
I got my first job when I was 18, and I wish I had have started way younger, because that thing about the hustle, I think I don't want to talk about Gen Z too much, but I think employers are looking for people who graft and turn up and put the effort in and will do what's required to help. And I think you proved all of those things at a young age. So then you got into fashion and then moved into digital PR later. So what I'm really interested in, we'll come on to later about how you broke into fashion, because I think that's another interesting thing for people to learn from, that you can change industry or get into a competitive industry, and there's ways to do it. But in this section, we're just going to talk about how to recognize what's the right job for you. So over the whole journey from the dog walking, that kind of thing, to then fashion to digital PR, how did you recognize what gets you out of bed in the morning, I suppose?
I think probably my favorite job of all time was being a waitress in my youth, because I loved being client facing. I loved talking to people. I loved giving them a good service. You knew when you'd done a good job because you would get a tip. The validation was pretty immediate, and you didn't have to, you got to mix with a lot of different people, so you could learn loads from other people. There's always a bad situation in hospitality, right? There's always something that goes wrong, whether the food's cold or it doesn't taste nice or whatever it happens to be. So despite maybe some people looking at it as like just a basic waitressing job, which I know tons of us did growing up, it was actually a really good way to kind of learn that client services side of things. The customer's always right, that sort of approach where you could learn from people, learn from experiences, do it better next time, handle it better next time, come up with responses, and essentially problem solve and troubleshoot where needed, but also give someone the best service so that they wanted to come back. So when you had when I worked in a pub, and I used to have people coming back and they'd chat to me and be like, "Hi, Millie, so nice to see you." That was always so lovely, because that return kind of business, in the same sense, was, I guess, feedback in its own sense. So yeah.
And it's all of this is extroversion, isn't it? It's getting on with people, liking that you can help them, you brighten their day, then they give you a tip, they brighten yours, and everyone's happy.
Yeah.
And how did that impact learning that? Did that impact your decision making? Because I know that when you were in the fashion industry, you had, to some extent, so you had a creative role creating clothes for the final customer. You also had a sales role, talking to big clients to buy the clothes from you. And then you had an operations role, which was trying to save the company money and change processes. You gave me a great example about how you everything was still written down on little pieces of paper, orders, and you put in an IT system. So were you happiest of all those three things? Were you happiest in the sales, or did you enjoy all of it?
I think honestly, I enjoyed all of it. I am relatively organized and motivated. I like problem solving. So I like spending time looking at solutions and maybe being in my own head to figure things out on the one hand, but then I am also a massive people person. I love being client facing. I love meeting new people, nurturing relationships, building relationships, all of that side of things. So I would say that kind of all three still apply, and I still get something out of all of them.
So if you were in a job where you were just taking the products that are being created to the customer, it might feel like there's something missing if you're not able to come back to HQ, come back to the company and say, "Look, guys, we need to change this. Let's work on that." There might be something missing.
Yeah, I think so. I think I always use the example that when someone's handed over work or when you take over a job from someone else, picking up someone else's loose ends or working on what they were working on can be really hard sometimes because you don't necessarily have the full end-to-end journey and process and the knowledge behind everything. So when you've like had a finger in all of the pies, I suppose, I think I get the most satisfaction out of that full end-to-end process.
Interesting. And you just so happen to work in a small scaling up digital company, and you like having fingers in all the pies. It just makes sense, doesn't it? It's like, well, that's, without giving the, saying it for you, it's like you can have it. All right. To what extent do you have that now where you're able to influence the whole area in the company that you've chosen to work for in Linkby?
I think we're so lucky. We're still a pretty small company, but we're growing very quickly. I started just over 2 years ago. I think I was around the 12th hire globally, and we're now up to about 50. The best thing about it is the quick growth, the quick movement, but also that every single person at the company is valued. And if you have an opinion or a thought or an idea, everybody wants to hear it. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the right one, but everybody's happy to have a discussion, brainstorm, say yes or no, give their opinion. I think that smaller company style suited me. Also, as you know, the transition from the end of the fashion part of my career was a little bit of a confidence knock in some sense. So going into a smaller company for me and having constant kind of, I guess, feedback and support and knowledge of what was happening in the wider business, because they're so good at keeping everybody in the loop, was a really nice comfort blanket that maybe I didn't know I needed. But actually the smaller company startup style really suited me because we get an update on everything that's going on in the business because we were working across multiple different pillars, especially at the beginning.
Okay, so that's loads of really positive stuff. To just have a quick look, because part of the reason for this podcast is if someone watching it is not feeling confident about themselves, and my opinion is it's very hard to build confidence when your ability is not being recognized and you're not in the right environment for you. You can't judge your ability at that point. So what happened then at the end of the fashion career and how did you feel when you were not able to build the momentum you wanted to?
It was tricky mainly because of COVID. So that had a huge part to play in terms of where we all thought we were going and where we ended up being. I was furloughed. I was a little bit bored. I was concerned that I might not have a job at the end of furlough. Fashion took a massive, massive knock, which I think everybody is aware of. So overall, it wasn't that I didn't feel that my job was safe. I think that was okay because everybody was in the same position across multiple different industries. It was more that I was starting to wonder whether it was the right thing for me. I'd slightly fallen out of love with not fashion. I still love fashion, but in terms of producing thousands and thousands of clothes and being in that kind of fast fashion rat race wasn't necessarily aligning with how I felt and how I'd grown through my 20s as a person. So I kind of got to this point where I wasn't really sure what was going on with my job and how it would look after COVID, but then also I just didn't love my job anymore and I couldn't really kind of see a way out. So I guess I felt a bit stuck because I think every other time I felt like it was time for me to move on from a company, I knew I still wanted to work in fashion. So it was an easy progression. I knew what the competitors were. I knew what I was looking for in terms of retailers, the kinds of clothing that I want, the kind of clothing I wanted to work in, tailoring or softs or whatever it happened to be. Whereas this time I was like, I know I want to change, but I have no idea what it should be or where I should go or how I can navigate my experience into a completely different industry.
And it makes sense because as you matured through your 20s, I suppose you realized, I mean, like fashion is a common thing, isn't it, for people to like when they're young? Well, I'm interested in clothes, bang, there's the career choice for me. And then the sustainability angle came in, and it's not going to work. So then how did you choose digital PR to get into? I mean, yeah, how did you choose that as an industry, or did it just come out of complete nowhere?
Yeah, honestly, it chose me. I think I'd looked at a few different options. Obviously, you and I had chatted tons. And I think PR had always been of interest to me, and the marketing space. You recommended I put my CV on a platform called Angel List, which is essentially a recruitment platform for startups. And I think that's amazing advice for anyone that does feel like they have transferable skills, but they don't necessarily know exactly where they fit or whether a company would consider them. Because startups think so laterally and they have such a broad vision. There's so much going on as they're kind of building and growing their business that all of the positions and responsibilities and job descriptions in their own, they're not all set in stone. They are very much about finding the right, well, certainly at Linkby, at the beginning, it really felt like they were looking for a type of person or personality. Because when I started, everybody got on, I mean, we still all get on amazingly, but there was I jumped on a call with everyone and everyone was amazing and everyone had this same kind of energy level of positivity. And it was just really exciting. So I remember I got an email from our founder, Chris, reaching out off the back of seeing my CV on this platform. And he was just so casual. And he was like, "Hey, Millie, like, seen your CV, think you've got good experience, would love to jump on a call." And you know what it's like when you get LinkedIn messages and things like that, you kind of ignore 70% of them because you're not really sure what they are. And something about his caught my eye. Anyway, I had this kind of 10-15 minute casual chat. He's based in Australia, so I remember it was like 8 p.m. I think he'd even been to the pub before. Don't know whether I should admit that. And
Well,
so
I think what you're saying is he matched your values in terms of
yeah,
not being too serious and grilling you and all of those things. He was friendly, warm, and built a rapport, which
yeah,
is how
and
it's the same as how you work, I think.
exactly. And so he really brought out my confidence and my best side rather than me going into an interview feeling so nervous and wound up and therefore not being calm and not necessarily performing or shouting about my achievements. Or maybe he brought out the best in me by his interview technique and also how he delivered his questions, and he was just calm and he just really made me feel at ease rather than intimidated, which for a woman in the fashion industry, I'd like to say I'm not easily intimidated, but that often happens. So it was really nice to have that complete clean slate and fresh perspective.
So it's really interesting. So my view, I've done it in talks to employers, is my view is that an interviewer's job is to make the interviewee as relaxed as possible so that they can be themselves. And then you're going to find out, really, instead of both of you putting on a performance and a show and sort of passing like this, you can be yourself and say what really matters to you. And then we can see, well, is this actually the right job for me? And it's really interesting that your experience in the fashion industry was not like that and didn't work, which I think is it that obviously contributed to you saying, actually, I've had enough of fashion. My next question was going to be, what tells or hints were there in your childhood that links to your current career? But whilst you were talking, I was thinking that you were saying that all the team was so positive, and I think that's a complete mirror of how you were positive when you were 13, going, I'll I'll just get out there, I'll make friends with anyone in the village, and I'll do some work for them, and I'll take a proactive attitude. And it's very, very similar, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm up for anything and I'm up for a challenge. So that's probably the pattern in my career from then until now.
Yeah, which can be a problem because when you're up for a challenge, if you're in an environment that is not healthy, you think, I'll change it. I'll take action and I'll change it. And then you're banging your head against a brick wall trying to improve something that you shouldn't be, without wanting to keep too negative. Is that about right?
Yeah, spot on, 100%.
Okay, so moving on to the next question. Which is a bit of a loaded one, how, if at all, did education help you get to where you are now?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. So I loved school. I had a great time. I wasn't always a high achiever academically. I always did a lot of other extracurricular things. I loved drama, I loved music. So it's hard. I think the school I was at was very university focused. And actually, when I was younger, I thought I was going to go to university, but it wasn't necessarily my own thought. It was just the natural progression when you leave school is to go to university. So I don't think it had ever really occurred to me that it was an option not to.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone actually told me it was an option not to. I think I just decided one day, actually, there was nothing at uni that I really, really, really wanted to do desperately. Of all of the courses, we had the career days where they came in and analysed us and told us what they thought we should be and where we should go and all of the grades that we needed to achieve. And I think it just dawned on me that I really wanted to work in fashion. I'd already made my mind up about that. So all of the fashion courses, they didn't seem to really resonate with me in terms of where to go and exactly what to do or which bit of fashion was best going to suit me, because I was interested from a journalism perspective, I was interested from the product perspective, design perspective, the whole lot. So I wasn't really sure kind of where to channel my energy, or nothing just really felt right or resonated. And it's a lot of money to spend if it's not the right fit. Yeah. So I just decided that I was going to go and get a job in fashion instead, because then I could just earn money. And if it didn't work out, well, it wasn't letting anyone down or spending money unnecessarily. I was going to make money and then figure out from that whether I was in the right bit. And if not, I could just move. And now looking back on it, that seems like a really bold decision. But at the time, it was honestly just so black and white to me. I just thought it was the obvious next step, and I told everyone I was just going to leave school and go and get a job and live in London, and everyone was quite shocked.
You were extremely bold. I wrote down bold. I've written it down twice in the preparation for this, but also just then when you were talking. And my view is that being weathered in the fashion industry is going to drain that boldness out of you at one point. But I also know that we'll come on to your first job in fashion and how you went from reception into getting the full job, but also that you tapped up a Parisian clothing brand and then landed a big contract with them, and just having the guts to do that. Do you think you've always been like that, really? It's just that when you find yourself in the wrong environment, it drained it out of you. Your self-belief can go. Because the thing is, people that, your natural instinct is to go, oh, there's something wrong with me, it's my fault. But actually, it's just being in the best environment for you is what makes the difference.
Yeah, 100%. I think I was definitely brought up in a you don't know until you try mentality. My parents they both worked. My dad was in insurance in the city. My mum worked for the NHS as an OT. So they both had very, very different careers and jobs. My dad went straight into it from school, and my mum knew that that's what she wanted to do from the age of 12. So they couldn't really relate, I guess, to that maybe more entrepreneurial side of me, but also the creative side or all of the options, because there was so much out there and so much choice. But they definitely taught me, you don't know until you try. And when I told them I wasn't sure if I was going to go to uni, actually, I'm not sure I pitched it like that, I'm not going to go to uni, they were fine with it. They didn't even bat an eyelid. They supported me immediately. It wasn't even a conversation I was worried about having, because I think they respected who I was as a person, but they pretty much just said to me, so long as you're not at home just doing nothing, which they knew I wouldn't do, because from 14 I'd been out and about and hustling. They just backed me. They were like, go for it. As long as you're not sitting on your bum at home, that's fine.
It's an interesting one with university. I think if you have a specific plan, or even if you don't have a plan, it can give you a lot of opportunities. I think now you need to go there and do as many extracurricular activities as you can. You need, employers are more interested in your work experience than the fact you've got a 2-1. So you need to, but I also think there is a real thing where if someone decides not to go to university and goes down another route, there's a growing thought of, well done them for not just following the crowd. And, you know, I'm interested in the fact that they had the guts to do that, which it sounds like you benefited from that. So if we move on from section 1, which is all about strengths, passions, interests, and how you've molded your career around that, I think we've covered that. The next section is interesting industries or job roles for people to go, do you know what, I wonder if I could do that. So would you mind giving me a quick rundown of what an average day is in your job at the moment?
I guess a little bit of an explainer about who Linkbee is and what we do. We're actually an Aussie founded company, and we now have presence in North America, the UK, and Singapore, as well as Australia. That's where all our founders are based. So essentially, we are a content solution. So we work similarly to that of PR and marketing. We're kind of a little bit of a hybrid, where brands are able to use our platform to pitch publishers of their choice, similar to that of a press release, I guess, would be the easiest way to kind of imagine it. And publishers therefore receive briefs and campaigns through our platform, and they're able to choose which brands they'd like to work with, which are the best fit for their audience, and then they publish content for those brands. And obviously the most important bit, how does it make money, is we work out of a CPC model, which is a cost per click. So using an example, let's say a jewelry brand pitch to Elle for Valentine's Day coverage for their new collection, and Elle choose to accept the brief. They might then do an online article, it's always digital, talking about the brand, about the launch. It could be a founder interview, it could be an inclusion of top 20 gifts to buy your girlfriend for Valentine's Day, whatever it happens to be. And within that content, there is a CPC link. Every time that link is clicked on, the publisher monetizes from the link. So it's all about engagement, essentially, with the content.
And I suppose the addictive thing is you can measure performance. So you can instantly see, okay, so we got this brand into this publication, this website, and this was what happened. And then you can go back to the client. And then is your role to come up with ideas how the advert could look as well, that kind of thing? Or where does your role start and finish?
Yeah, so I look after the publisher side of the business. So the publishers have full editorial control on what they write. And the campaigns and briefs that come through from the brands are usually a specific angle that the brand has pitched. So it could be something like a product launch, or a founder angle, or a specific retail period, or a discount or a sale, or something like that. So in terms of the brands that come through, that's more where we try and match brand campaigns to the correct publishers. So we're working really closely. Our team's kind of split in two. We have the publisher team and the partnerships team. So we kind of work hand in hand internally to make sure that the best brand briefs are being matched up to the best publisher fit, to ensure that when things then get accepted, they obviously, to your point, perform as strongly as possible. So like you say, when we get something that is the perfect match, it's amazing to see how quickly the content flies and the clicks come in. And yeah, it's an amazing marketplace. It also allows small brands to have access to bigger publishers where they might not have the funding for PR yet, or they might not have an affiliate platform that they work with. So it's a really great route for bigger brands, but also those smaller players, which I guess from my fashion days and some of the smaller startup sustainable fashion brands that I was really interested in is also was like a big point of interest when I was first getting into it. The fact that they could kind of pitch and get coverage in those fashion publications was something that I really loved kind of being part of.
So it sounds like you do your B2B stuff, you know, getting on with clients and customers as you did when you were a waitress, but then you're also coming up with ideas and how to help, and that must be really addictive because you're using your business knowledge, and as you did in fashion, like, what, how about we do this, how we do it, testing it, see does it work, and then come back to the client's happy, you're happy. And I assume that means that you're in, what I like to do is help people find jobs where they're in flow and they're just focused on it, and then suddenly the day's gone and it's time to go and do something else. Like, how closely would you say you are to that?
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty good summary. I think there's always so much going on. We're always spinning 100 plates because we're making sure the publishers are happy, we're making sure the partnerships team are getting what they need if there's a problem or a solution, or if there's a new brand that's coming through, making sure we're flagging it in time. So there's always so much going on. And then separate to that, we're working on growing the business, troubleshooting new ideas that are going to help the rest of the team or make a difference externally in terms of like a new deck that might be helpful, or an internal resource that's going to really benefit the partnerships team. So we're always kind of trying to think of those new ideas. And then at the same time, every month we're obviously looking at the numbers. Well, every day we're looking at the numbers, but every month we're looking at the numbers to see who's grown month on month, where the gaps are, what they could do to, you know, continue to perform and promote content and drive stronger and bigger and better results. So there's always, tons going on, which is great. And definitely within all of those separate things, there's kind of lots of challenges, which fits what I love to do.
Are most people coming into it from PR? Obviously you came from fashion. Where else can people come from to get into this industry?
It's very varied in terms of the experience that we have in the UK team. So our founder, Chris, actually founded a youth publishing platform called Pedestrian over in Australia. If you're Aussie, you'd have heard of it. It's huge. Then so we have a few people in the UK team who actually worked with Chris at Pedestrian over in Australia before he founded Linkbee that he brought on. Then we also have people that have come from Woucher. I've come from fashion. We have someone that's straight out of uni, a whole broad spectrum. I would say most people have some sort of online digital experience. Right. Whether it be from marketing or agency side or publisher side. But yeah, I would say that's probably the majority of the team. Yeah.
And Linkbee are hiring at the moment. So what sort of gaps have they got, and who would you recommend to apply?
At the moment, we don't have any gaps in the UK team. So if you're in Australia, there are jobs available on the partnership side, right? Okay. In that team, but definitely we're looking at kind of growing and expanding this year. So I think there will be opportunities that come up both in our partnerships team, agency side, where you're looking to, you know, bring new business on board, expand our brand portfolio, and then hopefully maybe expanding the publisher team too, but not totally sure what that looks like yet. And
then the future for digital PR, have you got any thoughts on that, or is it a bit too high level to ask about?
I think the way that Linkbee's growing is it's super dynamic, super responsive to the marketplace. I think it's no secret that publishing can be a tricky industry, especially now with social media and influencers and everything else kind of in the marketplace alongside traditional digital content. Yeah. So the main updates I would say is that the founders and the rest of the team are super dynamic, super forward thinking, and so they're always kind of troubleshooting ideas and options and growth expectations and managing the process behind that to ensure that we're kind of expanding and being as dynamic as possible so that we continue to grow.
Lovely. And then moving on to the last section, which is how to sell yourself and how to job search. So basically the problem is almost all of us find selling ourselves very challenging. So what are your thoughts on that issue of selling yourself and saying that you are good at things, and how have you combated it?
I think it's really tough. I found it a lot easier when I was younger, and I think I felt like I had nothing to lose. I think that's where the boldness came from. So you could just go for it, and if it didn't pan out, then it was fine, because you hadn't built up a portfolio, a career. You didn't have a history, so people weren't looking at you with a level of expectation when you're younger. Whereas now I do have, but obviously as you grow in your career, you do have that. I was actually on holiday with a bunch of girls a couple of weeks ago, and one of the girls works for a big corporate finance company, and she had been in a training session where it was a female women in business training session, and all of them had to stand up and talk about how great they were for 10 minutes.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And not necessarily how great they were, but all of their strengths and what they excelled at and why they were good at their job and that whole thing. And it was meant to be a really affirming kind of positive exercise. Is actually, we tried to do it on holiday, and it was so hard, even in front of your friends. It was honestly, like, I really struggled with it. I found it mortifying to talk about your strengths, and also to really sell yourself in the sense of, you could say, oh, I'm quite good at this or I'm quite good at that, but that
doesn't cut it, does it, in an
interview? I'm 10 out of 10 at all of these things. It was really difficult, and I obviously didn't have to do it. We were just having a cocktail at the bar. So I think that's something that I really actually took as a takeaway, and that I think people should work on, because we should all be able to really shout about what our strengths are, what we've achieved.
There's a common problem, is that if you're good at something, you then assume that it's common sense and that everyone is good at that thing, and then you just focus on the things that you're not good at. So my top tip here is to focus on facts. And if you say, for instance, the large contract that you came back, a bit like Emily in Paris, you came back from Paris grasping, going, I've won this. Or there's other, I'm not going to quote figures, but amazing things that you did with other large brands in the UK. Those are facts. And if you go, well, I landed that contract, well, how did I do it? If you can talk about that, no one can take it away from you. And it's not you bigging yourself up. It's just, this is what I achieved and this is how I did it. And it takes all of that anxiety away, because it's just the truth. I think that works quite well.
Yeah, you're totally right. I love that. I think that's really good advice. I think it's very easy, and I definitely get it, where we all have imposter syndrome and feel like we don't belong in what we're doing, or maybe like not quite where we need to be, or we don't deserve to be on a call or be in a room with a big client. But actually, you're right. If you look at the facts and you kind of pan out what you have achieved, then that's a really good way to kind of take a measure of what you have done and what your successes are.
Let's talk about quickly, so how you broke into fashion, which is one of the most highly sought after industries globally, or certainly in the UK, without any qualifications in fashion, I think. So how did you do that?
I got a contact through a family friend. She was a pattern cutter, and I asked her if she would introduce me to one of the designers at the company that she worked at. We had a big conversation. She told me all about the industry and introduced me to this designer. I then harassed, really. Finally said it was polite persistence, but I basically was like, this is my opportunity. I have no other leads at the moment, so I've got to throw everything I can at this. So I offered to come down to London. I sent her dates. I called her. I followed up. Harassment rather than polite persistence. And eventually she agreed to a meeting. I decided that the meeting where she was going to tell me about the industry and basically be nice to me and then send me on my way was my opportunity for an interview, which she didn't know. And so in my head, I was like, this is my opportunity. So I have to go in and I have to sell myself and I have to come out with a job at the end of it. So I've paid for my train ticket now. So that's what I did. She was amazing. She did offer me a job as a member of the sales team in account management, but the MD of the company made me sit on the reception desk for 6 months first. So I started off there before I could move into sales. So that was sort of my initiation process, was working on reception, which was honestly great and actually really good advice for someone that's new and starting out, because from that desk, you're helping people all day. Everybody's very lovely to you. You really only need to make cups of teas and run out and get people's lunch. And I was taking clothes to buying offices and doing various jobs, but nothing was particularly hard. What it allowed me to do was really get a grasp of how the company worked, how it ticked, who ticked in what way, reading the people. I could see what triggered bad moods, good moods, how to work the people in the company, which when you're young and you need to learn off everyone because you don't know anything, is a really great way to kind of take a step back and be a little bit perceptive and figure out essentially what you can get from everyone in order to benefit yourself, but also benefit them alongside, whether it's sitting down with someone who comes in half an hour early and they're happy to chat to you about this, that, and the other, and you'll make them a, coffee in return or whatever it happens to be. So
yeah,
it was a great start, honestly.
So my next question is, how did you then go from breaking? So look, I mean, that's great advice, and that's how you get in and understand and learn. But how did you make the step to then getting into that sales role, getting into a job you wanted to do, I suppose?
Again, probably the polite persistence / harassment, however we want to label it. I really wanted to move into the account management side of the business. I had been told in my very initial interview that that's where they saw me going. So I then got myself into a sticky situation where there was no one to replace me on reception. I wanted to move off, but they didn't want to replace me because they liked me being there. So
which is a problem for people.
So I think I would have probably been about 19 and a half. I wasn't 20 yet, definitely not. I was allowed to put the job ad up myself and recruit for my replacement. Most of these girls were 3 years older than me, had a degree from London College of Fashion, and wanted a job as a receptionist because they were so desperate to get into the fashion industry. So it was a very interesting experience for me, especially interviewing them with not much experience myself. I did ask other people to join the interviews, and eventually we found an amazing girl called Tina who took over for me. So then I was responsible for basically training her up and getting her up to speed so that I could then move into the sales team. But it all just came from me pushing, because I would still be on that reception desk if I hadn't put my hand up to say, when am I moving across?
So just to take a step back, so I came off a call before this one with a guy who must have been sort of mid-40s, and I was trying to coach him in how to ask for intros, because what happens is, I think as you get older, your comfort zone is that you've got a company behind you, so a company logo. Okay, well, I work for Gap or whoever, so they must want to talk to me because of Gap. But what I try and coach people to do is, instead of just over deliver for everyone, actually ask. So you were able to ask for that introduction when you met introduction to the designer. I have to coach people in their 40s, 50s about how to do that, because it malfunctions with our brains because we think, oh, I shouldn't ask, I shouldn't be. And I mean, the general point about job searching, saying I'm good at things. Well, when do you say that? You don't turn up socially, you know, or if you're in a team, you say it wasn't me, it was the team. And so you have to sort of flip things on its head. And again, the way your polite persistence, the way you approach that is, you know, it makes anxiety in people. But also, if you flip it, it shows I really want this and I'll work really hard. And we know what works on The Apprentice when even the ones that aren't very good, if they say, Alan, I'll work really hard, he just can't resist it. So I think people can't resist passion. So I think there's a lot of things that people can learn from the way you approach this. I mean, it's incredible. You were 19 and replacing yourself with people who are 4 years older with degrees, and you were leading that process. That's fantastic. But there's people, you can learn things from the way you approach that, whether you're a graduate or whether you're, you know, got 30 years experience in your industry. So that is pretty cool. So just conscious of time, before I do a little summary, is there anything that you would like to ask me about careers that you don't know already? Bearing in mind we've worked together before. Anything at all? If there isn't, it's absolutely fine.
I think the only thing that I would just really say to everybody listening is, originally you were recommended to me by friends when I'd kind of got myself a little bit stuck and wasn't really sure where I was going or what to do. And I wasn't really sure about what the process would be, or whether I really needed it, or whether you could help me. And I think it was one of those things. Someone said to me, if you'd broken your ankle or done something to yourself physically, you would obviously go and see a doctor to get it sorted, or go and see a physio. It's the same thing. Like if something's not right, it doesn't mean you have to fix it on your own. And I had so much validation from all of my family and friends that I was no longer listening to, because I was like, well, they love me, so they have to say that. They have to say I'm good at my job, or they have to say I deserve better, or they have to say I, you know, whatever. But when you and I chatted and you were saying all of these things to me, I was like, oh wow, like he doesn't care about me, as in, you don't know me, you didn't know me very well now, but you didn't know me. So you were saying all of these things out of respect for what I'd achieved, rather than because you had a friendship loyalty towards me. So I think, yeah, it's interesting how you kind of pick out all of that information and the process on your end. I'm sure it's probably evolved a little bit since I first worked with you. You have all these forms and things now. But yeah, I guess just kind of explaining that process to people, and that it's not necessarily that they need to come out with a job at the end of it, but that it's such a important thing for realizing what you can achieve and what you're capable of as a process.
Well, so okay, so to take that on and summarize, so I think although age is probably, you know, takes some of the enthusiasm and, you know, things to lose out of it, but you're still the same person from that sort of 13-14-year-olds who was like, sod it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to try. And the only thing that drained that out was some interesting cultures in the fashion industry, where if you've got people telling you, oh no, you're great, there was nowhere to turn really. Whereas, okay, the culture was wrong, it wasn't that you were wrong. And so now, when you told us earlier about Linkbee and about how it's a small company, I can get involved everywhere. They're super positive, they're open to your ideas, they think laterally, I can solve problems anywhere, and they're so informal and friendly, not informal, but friendly and relaxed, whilst also working hard and getting on with it. You said it brought out my confidence and brought out my best side. So you basically found a great environment to work in, which is not luck, it's by design. I mean, there's a bit of luck, obviously, but it's by design. And anyone watching this can do that. And you've recognized, well, what makes me happy? Okay, back to that restaurant job. Well, I like getting that instant affirmation, but also you recognized I like changing processes, and you've tried to combine those together. Other stuff that we talked about is for employer interviews, how to get the best out of people, make people feel relaxed. When I did my talk, I had a slide of the pub to show it should feel like someone is telling their friend about their job. That's how it should feel like in an interview, in my opinion. But I'm sure other people will disagree with that. We've also talked about how you like a challenge and don't want to back down, which can be a problem when you're in the wrong culture, because you've got to recognize I can't solve these problems, and I've been there as well. And then we talked about the future of digital PR and the fact that you're in an online marketplace, which is clearly a booming space. And then lastly, we moved on to your persistence and your tactics about how to find jobs and how to network. And there's loads of stats out there. LinkedIn did one about how it's 81% of jobs pass hands through networking. It's really effective. Show your passion, ask people things. We're all connected and we can help each other. So thank you very much for joining.
Pleasure.
Hope you enjoyed it as much as hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and there was loads of value. And yeah, I look forward to seeing the results.
Yeah, amazing.
All
Thanks.
right.